Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. We'll get started here in about 3 minutes. We are going to have a poll. So we are bringing in a poll before we get started. We'll have that up shortly. If you could participate in it, 6 questions, that would be lovely to help frame the conversation today. So we do have a poll going. Can I get that going for you right now? All right. It is launched. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. Thank you all for joining today. Just to reiterate, we do have an event poll today. We're going to kick off. There's 6 questions that you should see on your screen. If you could answer those, that would be oh so lovely as we get into the conversation. Super helpful to make sure that we're catering to everybody's needs and what they deem most important. So where are you guys sitting, Zach and Andrew?
Go ahead, man.
Well, I'm in a little town some of you may have heard of called Las Vegas.
Las Vegas. Nice.
Yeah, that's handy given all the events and conventions that happen there.
Yes, absolutely.
It's wonderful. Definitely one of the reasons I wound up moving here, and I was surprised how much I enjoy Vegas in general. It's been a wonderful place, wonderful town to live. Zach,
Awesome.
where are you?
Yeah, I'm in Denver. So also a nice little spot. The fewer conventions, but still some is nice. But yeah, we're in a nice little location right in between the city and then up to the mountains. So get kind of the best of both worlds sitting here.
Absolutely. The mountains are perfection. That's the one thing I wish Minnesota had. I keep trying to tell my daughter, like she wants to try snowboarding and like going to the mountains. I'm like, Viv, we don't really have mountains here in Minnesota. We have these like hills, dirt hills.
Or when do you hook her up behind the car and just tow her around the neighborhood?
Yeah, we might have to through the cul-de-sac.
I would
We
love
got
to see
enough
that.
snow yesterday. It might be possible. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. So we do have an event poll up right now. It's 6 questions. If you could fill them out, that would be oh so lovely before we kick off our discussion. So helpful to understand what is top of mind for everyone. So please fill that out if you can. All right. Yeah, we had no snow. Everything melted. It was like 50, 55 degrees. And then we got tons of it yesterday. Snow day, school closed, like the whole shebang.
Yeah.
Well, it's just teasing you.
I know, like March.
55 degrees seems quite warm for Minnesota in March.
Oh, yeah. And I was celebrating it because we're selling Girl Scout cookies. I'm a troop leader. So I'm like outside selling cookies. Like, wow, I can feel my fingers. This is great. This is great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
What's it been like in Vegas, Andrew? Lots of snow?
It actually does snow here once every year or two. And you can actually look off in the distance on the hills and they actually have snow. You can actually ski 45 minutes from Vegas, which most people don't know.
Best of both worlds.
It
Seriously.
was beautiful. It actually hit the 70s for a day or two, and now we're in the mid 50s, which I will absolutely take. We had a little bit of rain last 2 days, and it's beautiful again. Soon it'll be 118. So
Oh, gosh.
holding on to all of this.
Well, you
Yeah.
could. Awesome. Well, we're going to kick this off. As we're doing intros here, feel free to finish the event poll if you haven't already. But happy Thursday, everyone. I am Tiffany Service Gustafson, a digital strategist with BWG Connect, and we are a network and knowledge sharing group. We stay on top of the latest trends, challenges, whatever's shaping the digital landscape. We want to know and talk about it. We are on track to do hundreds of these webinars this year due to the increase in demand to better understand the digital space. And we'll also do at least 100 in-person small format dinners. So if you happen to live in a tier 1 city in the US, feel free to reach out to us via our website or one of our team members. We'd love to send you an invite. The dinners are typically 15 to 20 people having a discussion around a certain digital topic, and it's always a fantastic time. We spend the majority of our time talking to brands. That's how we stay on top of the latest trends. And I'd love to have a conversation with you. So feel free to drop me an email at Tiffany, Tiffany, at bwgconnect.com, and we can get some time on the calendar. It's from these conversations we generate the topic ideas we know people want to learn about. And it's also where we gain our resident experts, such as Sigil and TrackStreet, who are with us today. Anyway that we ask to teach a collective community has come highly recommended from multiple brands within the network. So if you're ever in need of any recommendations within the digital space, please don't hesitate to reach out. We have a short list of the best, and we would love to provide that information to you. A few housekeeping items before we get started. First and foremost, we want this to be fun, educational, conversational. Drop the questions, comments into the chat, the Q&A as we move along, and we will get to them. Also, we have this event poll. It will be closing here shortly. So do get your responses into that so we can frame the discussion accordingly. So without further ado, let's jump right into it and talk about how brand protection unlocks your untapped revenue potential. The team at Sigil and TrackStreet are awesome partners of the BWG community. I'm going to kick it over to our panelists. If you can give an introduction, that would be oh so lovely, and then we will jump right in. Zach, I will start with you.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, Tiffany. Hey, everybody, welcome. One thing I'll just quickly note, what I hear too from brands is that those dinners that they do with BWG are always phenomenal. So highly recommend if you're ever able to get to those. Those tend to always be great. So, all right. Yep. So you can see on the slides here, apparently Andrew and I have the same photographer. Who knew? But
looking good.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Well, what you guys should know, I guess, about me here is my background is as an attorney. I was at a top 10 global firm, and then I was an in-house general counsel. And so that means I have sat in many of your shoes. I have lived these problems inside at the brand, wrestling with these challenges and with our partners and challenges with growth, et cetera. It was sort of my personal mission when I was in-house to try to turn our legal department into a revenue generator. And so I've thought deeply about these issues for a long time. It's very close to my heart. So I'm excited to kind of share some of our thoughts with you guys. And, Andrew also is deeply knowledgeable in this space. So we will try to tailor kind of our comments to what we hear in those poll responses. So, please make sure you try to answer some of those and we'll go from there. So anyway, that's me. Oh man, I'm just noticing there's actually a typo in my name on there. So it's Zach Garth. It's not Zach Graff, but you'd be surprised at how often that happens. Awesome. Andrew, good to you.
Oh boy, we blew that, didn't we, Zach? So sorry. You'd think my last name would be the one that have the problem, not yours. Well, it's great to be here, Tiffany. Thanks for helping to organize this. And earlier, before you all joined, we were talking about polo shirts, and there is proof that I do own a TrackStreet polo shirt in that picture. So there we go. Bill, second one, Zach said, please, if you haven't yet, fill out the poll. It will guide our conversation today, and I think it'll be really interesting as we walk through this. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. I started my first brand in '98, selling my own brand of products direct to the consumer on the internet. That led into retail product sales with my brand and then carrying everybody else's products. At one point in time, I had a business that had over 40,000 different EPCs on the warehouse floors, 200 to 400 deep. I started a distribution company where I was running trucks up and down the coast of California. I had some retail, and I was the guy that brands called when the internet wasn't behaving. And so, I would feel these conversations of people that were really struggling to understand what the internet was doing and realize there's this opportunity to go from what the internet is doing to you to what it can do for you, this massive growth machine. So how do we harness all of that power and drive brands forward? And so I am very passionate about all these subjects. In a lot of ways, it's like, who do you go to when you want to protect your house? You go to the guy that used to break into the houses, right, and crack the safes. I'm kind of that guy. I played all the games. I understand the tricks. And so TrackStreet is all about restoring power to the brands. And so we are all about ensuring the right products to the right partners, the right prices to the right customers. How do you optimize sales channels? But this is a really fun stuff, and I can't wait to dig in with you guys today.
Awesome. Thank you, Zach. Andrew. I mean, this is going to be a fun conversation. Let's be real. So we're starting with a poll. We'll give about another 10 seconds for everyone to get their answers in. If you haven't, looks like most have, but 10 more seconds, please get your answers in, and then I will end it. Thank you.
For those of you who haven't taken the poll or are thinking about it, these are the questions there. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how you all split up around this. E-commerce is shifting quickly. I think the news of the last week or two here in the US, as I saw, we've got someone in the UK, it's certainly shifting outlook for what margins look like, what channels look like, how does product get to market and from where. So we're at a time of potential change. So I'm very curious to hear how this shakes out.
All right. Are we ready to share?
All right, let's see.
All right. Can you see it? Everything good?
There we go. So we've got, for planning to expand DTC sales this year, looks like 2/3 are yes and 1/3 is no. It's pretty interesting. Are you more focused on revenue or profit? We got 2/3 focused on profit, 1/3 on revenue. That's also interesting. All right, where are you planning to find that growth? And we've got, it's like the plurality are saying on marketplaces, 45%, so almost half say for marketplace, followed by their e-commerce storefront, and then other sources. Not a lot of love for social commerce on there.
Interesting.
Yeah, which is
Yeah.
fascinating. And a little bit of brick and mortar. Don't miss that one. How do we approach Amazon? We've got a lot of basically a pretty even split of 1P or 1P and 3P, and then a little bit of doing their own 3P account. So it looks like folks have moved away from using 3P authorized sellers there. Resale policies, we've got pretty interesting distribution here. About a quarter of you have both. A third to a quarter of you have just a price policy or an authorized reseller policy. And almost a quarter don't have either. Very interesting. Average unit retail looks like 2/3 use this, maybe 1/3 doesn't. 40% are using it to evaluate the sales performance of products. And then there's a smattering of other benefits, use cases here of performance of bundles or product pricing or inventory planning. Great.
Interesting. Thank you all for participating. Like, this is great content to jump into it. Remember, questions, comments put into the chat or the Q&A as we move along here. I will stop sharing so you will get
Yeah, and
access to this
I'd
when you
love to hear in the chat if this is surprising to you. So we
Yes.
have at this point, how many do we have? We have 20 people in the room. Like, is this what you thought things would shake out as? So it looks like there's a trend here towards owning more of your revenue, certainly, and a shift in how you're dealing with marketplaces. I got to say, I myself am surprised we didn't have one respondent say that's social. For example, the TikTok.
Exactly. Which was a lot of hype last year with a lot of events we did. So that's very interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so looks like we got one chat. So Katie, not surprised. Okay, awesome. Well, you're one. I am. That's excellent. I think I'll be curious. I'll encourage all of you as we go, use the chat. We're gonna have a Q&A at the end. If we watch our words here, we'll have time for it. Please jump in here and keep the conversation going. So I want to start off with some information. We're going to weave in some statistics and some market data along with some strategies. This is all about following the money. So let's be really clear. Like, we want to return more profitability to your sales. How do you do that? And I'm a strong proponent of brand protection as a mechanism to do that, which sounds a little crazy, but I think you're going to understand why by the end of this conversation. So just to give you an idea, I'm curious. If you looked, we took 13 brands in the pet space, and we track over 2,200 sites for them. This is just a sampling. We work with about 1,000 brands. And so how many of you would expect all 13 brands to appear on the major pet websites? So think about the Amazon, the Walmart, the Chewy's. Some of you who understand, like, the pet industry will know more than others. But
PetSmart, Petco.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how does this break down? And so what we've learned is that there's lots of micro markets within every channel and industry. So for example, Amazon and Walmart, all 13 brands represented, only on 11 brands at Chewy and Petco, 10 Pet Supplies Plus, and then PetSmart and Target, 9. So it's really the impact of retail distribution, how much shelf space is there versus everything in the world, right? Virtual inventory as it scales up and down. But we really see, and particularly in pet, there's lots of little websites that matter depending on what kind of product you have. If you make products for a very small part of the market, you have very specialized sites. We were surprised when we started the company how diverse the industries were. We track over 165,000 websites. When we started, we couldn't have imagined that. So it's very broad.
And can I just jump in on that one too, Andrew? Just so you guys know, right? Because every company is so different and unique and ends up, across all these different sites, the way you approach your brand protection and the way that impacts your revenue is also going to be really unique. So like Andrew and I will speak to trends and try to answer questions as best we can, but like definitely utilize the Q&A or the chat if you have like specific questions in your guys' scenario to try to get answers. Like this data really illustrates just how unique the exposure is for each brand. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks for that, Zach. And I'll add that when we're talking about brand protection, it's really important to think of it as an ecosystem. E-commerce is vast, and every part of this e-commerce ecosystem is interrelated. The reality is someone could sit on a couch in their house and very quickly see the world of e-commerce. So Walmart's influenced by Amazon and vice versa. It also is impacted by eBay and all these other websites within industries. They're all interrelated. So you got to have a really broad viewpoint to make this all work well and synchronize it. So we actually went back and looked for the last essentially 3 years. What's the trend for kind of policies that you have for brand protection? Think of this as the foundation of your house. So is it a price-based policy like a MAP, IMAP, and such? Is it authorized reseller policies? What you'll see is that we've moved in this direction of essentially brands enforcing on both policies. So they're both designed to protect your customers and your brands, but you see that we now have 65% of new customers in 2024 had both policies in place, and a reduction in just price policy or just authorized reseller enforcement. You'll see that last year we had no new customers doing just authorized. And as you're going to hear from Zach, this is very, very much about foundation in place and having the tools to deal with price irregularities, and which also impacts profitability and pressure on product, but also how do you have the teeth you need to chew and bite down on the naughty resellers when you want to. Zach, anything to add?
No, I would echo that. We see this same interaction over on our side of things, and that you have like this also demonstrates, the brands are learning that it is an interrelated ecosystem, and inventory impacts inventory in ways that you don't expect. So, I think that this is a trend that I expect we'll continue to see.
Fantastic. Well, let's talk about what happens if you don't put these controls in place.
Sure.
Oh
Yeah,
boy.
so
Having post-traumatic stress here from the days I had to play whack-a-mole. Can't wait.
Yeah, for real. So I'll just, I think the way to think about these pain points, I know many folks here on the call have seen or experienced at least some of these, right, is that they're all interrelated. And, I think of it like if you're trying to run a marathon and you're only focusing on, training and running, but you're not taking care of your nutrition and your sleep and your hydration, right, then it's going to be really hard for you to progress as a runner or get where you want to be. It's hard to, get that growth you're trying to see. And instead, anyway, we'll come to what happens when you get all those things aligned. But so this is sort of a demonstration of just what happens when you kind of are working against yourself if you don't have control, right? So, for example, you'll see uncontrolled price drops, and that has really big kind of ripple effects, not only, in the specific channel where there's that price drop, but then it'll erode margins, across multiple channels as your retailers are forced to price match, right? So many of you are looking to expand in your marketplace channel, but there's also a good amount that are emphasizing your retail growth, and so you want to be mindful, right, of how those interrelate. And also, if you have that variability in that price drop in those prices, you start to impact the customers, the consumer's perception of you and your brand, and where they can find bargains, right? So many brands are trying to keep an important margin. I know that, right, 2/3 of you are trying to grow your profit margins in this coming year. And so if your brand has a reputation of, something that can be bargain hunted, then it's gonna be hard to push up for those prices. You start to lose that kind of brand credibility. Uh, Other aspects that happen, it's like your marketing gets really hard to be effective. And so, again, if you're pushing on marketplace or your storefronts were a big one, right? If you guys are trying to drive growth through your storefronts, you're going to be running a lot of ad campaigns and influencers, et cetera, to try to, pick up that impression. Well, those ad campaigns end up underperforming when you have other resellers who are taking control of that, who, will undercut on price. And then, as you say, if you run an influencer campaign over into your marketplace channel that you're trying to grow, and you've got a reseller on the buy box, right, you're not getting any return on that ad spend. So then that becomes hard next year when you go to try to defend that marketing budget, right, and you haven't had that return, right, it has all these like knock-on effects that make it hard to grow. The retail impact is also one of the most important ones, and sometimes the hardest to see, because retailers don't always tell you, hey, we're disappointed in all the price matching we had to do, or, we're not seeing the kind of like SKU, like the inventory movement here on these SKUs. So sometimes they'll just not reorder as much. Sometimes they'll pull back on doors or SKUs, or you can't get, maybe you're on a trial and you're trying to roll out additional SKUs or get into an end cap, and they're not giving it to you. And you might not know that's actually because of issues around brand control and resellers impacting all of that. And all of that, can be addressed and can be fixed. There are other issues though that are a little bit more permanent, which is if you lose control of that brand and customers have really bad buying experiences, you might lose that customer, for years or possibly permanently, depending on what has happened there. Sometimes these, resellers will sell used or expired product, right? And that can cause really bad experience. So, and then that also has further knock-on effects because they're not extolling the virtues of your brand, right? They are potentially going to be leaving negative reviews, which then you've got to run more ads to try to counteract that. And now you're in this really challenging spot, because if you can't get those things moving, algorithm rankings will start to push down. It becomes just really challenging, right? It's like you're trying to run that marathon, but if you're not taking care of the things that you need to, it's going to get hard to get there. So that's where that, there's a death spiral there that we talk about at the bottom. And which is not to say that companies are going to go out of business in a year if you haven't found brand control, but your growth is going to stop. And that's where that starts to really push down. So, it looks like pretty much everybody here is trying to improve their business and drive up their profits. And if you don't have that brand control, it's going to be a very, very difficult task.
And not only on the consumer side, we've been doing more B2B webinars, and 80% of your B2B buyer is doing their due diligence research before they even come knocking on your door. So if they're seeing pricing all over the board, brand discrepancy, that's their first impression as well. So that side of the business is impacted. So yes, death spiral is a good way to describe it. Questions, comments, put into the chat and the Q&A as we move along. But quite a laundry list of ick.
Yeah. Well, and that could be why it's hard to address some of this is brands sometimes don't know like which pain point to get after first. And, how do you solve this can be kind of confusing. Andrew has a nice way of explaining sort of a process and a framework and escalating on, where to start and how to move forward through these things. And so I think that's helpful because it's a really efficient way to go about it. But yeah, it's a big big mess.
Yeah, it's really a conversation of conversion, right? This is a conversion of your B2B partner and making them feel supported and empowered. And it's a conversion of the consumer, right? Are they feel confident buying your product where they're buying it. And it's very hard to dig out. One analogy I love using is the whole concept of love languages. And I don't know how many in this call are familiar with that, but our job is to speak the language of love from our partner and fill their love tank. And it doesn't matter how we intend it, it's how they receive it. And so our retailers speak the language of profitability, right? Our distribution partners, profitability. And if you're simply not watching out for them and you're not guarding the price point or distribution channels and you're not taking ownership of that and that control, well, they're not going to feel the love. And whatever you're doing for them isn't going to matter because they're simply going to feel neglected and they're going to go find love somewhere else. And that takes the form of new relationships with other brands, and they give more shelf space and take the new products in. And we want to fill that tank, right? So brand protection does drive profitability of sale of channel because you are working together with your value-added partners. And that's the key, the value-added partner.
Absolutely. Well put.
Yeah. So, and thank you, Caroline. Saw you come in with that question about B2C. Like, absolutely, direct is very similar. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit as we go through here, like the various channels. But like, people look at your brand everywhere, right? They don't just come to your site. Like, they don't come to one place. Like, they're going to go look and survey your brand. If there's crazy variation on price and some really horrible reviews and they're unsure if it's safe to buy your product, like, that's a problem for you. That's going to bring your conversion rates down everywhere. And that means your advertising you're doing and how hard you work to bring that consumer into wherever they're going. Well, it's not going to work as well. You're going to lower return on that. You're going to have more of those people come in and you have an uphill climb into getting them to buy your product and having a great experience with it.
Yeah, the kind of the conversion rate and the add to cart rates, right, are impacted pretty directly when you have lots of negative reviews out on there on that product.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time working on how to increase conversion on websites, specifically. It's the consumer experience, and the reality is when there's a gap between what someone knows, what they need to know to make a decision on something, they don't decide. Like, the decision is not to decide, and they leave. So what you don't want is friction in that process, and so it's really all about collapsing that and taking away the reasons they have for not buying your product. Like, you work so hard to get them there, wherever they are. Like, let's close that transaction. So, Kellen, we'll get into MAP in a little bit, and so if we can, we'll come back to that pricing recommendation. Let's talk about how this stuff works and what happens in markets, how you escalate through a process to have impact, right? What are your weapons? Let's get there a little bit later. So let's just take an example. I love looking at companies that are in this space. This is a company that we've recently been talking to. They have an authorized reseller policy. They have a MUP policy. They are Amazon 1P, but you know what? They really haven't been enforcing their policies. They don't know what to do. They've used some other people to try to get some resellers off of Amazon. It hasn't worked. They don't really know what to do, and they haven't solved the problems, but like, they kind of have a program, they just aren't doing anything with it, which, by the way, is far worse because your partners know that you have this program, but you clearly don't love them. Like, there's no question you don't love them once it's failing. So, like, this brand's interesting. We'll walk through a little bit of it, and I think it'll illustrate what we've been talking about. So this brand has 271 total merchants on their products as of, I think, yesterday. 167 of those sellers are in marketplaces. So they've got a lot of marketplace activity, which I'll show you. They have 104 websites selling their products. Now, it's not uncommon for people to have no idea where they're being sold. You ask someone, how many people do you think sell your products online? 40. And really have come back with 2,512 websites are selling your products and all these resellers, and they're all selling for half off and heads explode. This is not uncommon. So these guys, as I mentioned, have a pricing policy. It's a MAP policy, 147 violations. This is just on 10 products, very small part of their catalog. 69 MAP violations on their websites, and 26 of the 104 websites are being naughty. Right? Like, this is not good. These are people that are just stealing sales, right? This is bad for your brand. Like, this is not how you build profitable sales channels. And to extrapolate, like, let's look at some of their some of their products. So the price ranges are crazy. Low price, high price, and average price is wild. So look at this crazy distribution. So $35.99. Like, who is gonna, one, no one can compete with that. Two, is it real? Is it gray market? Like, what is that, a scam website? Like, the average price is $112. Like, that's a crazy price spread. This is terrible for consumers who are thinking about where to buy your product. They just don't trust it. Right? This is causing a lot of friction in the space. And you can see with every one of their products, there's a really wild spread. And if you look at marketplace activity, so all of you were talking about, really the majority are, I believe it was 2/3 are working on increasing marketplace sales this year. How many of you are thinking about eBay? So eBay is a $10 billion a year channel. 70% of products on eBay sold are new. I was shopping eBay last night for some kitchen stuff, some appliances. This brand has 100 eBay resellers. Now, guarantee you, there's a bunch of unauthorized sales happening here at crazy price points. And this is a totally untapped revenue opportunity for a lot of brands. It's very common when you see this kind of stack, and people are very surprised by it. But again, you look at all these marketplaces for this one product, each of you will probably have a similar spread. It might be surprising, but each one of these presents an opportunity for you to decide, who do I want these sales to go through? Is it through an authorized partner? Maybe show them the love. But what value are they creating for you by being there? Are they sticking out a net and taking the traffic? Are they truly creating sales? Or do you want to think about owning that so that you can own the profits that come out of your work driving people to brand recognition? And the ones that, if they're going on Amazon, people don't really generally educate themselves on Amazon. They're just going to buy stuff. Like, who should get that sale, right? These are all conversations, and these are just a handful of marketplaces where we now have that conversation.
And I'll just add to your point on this, Andrew, with eBay, right? eBay recently announced its partnership with Facebook Marketplace. And so now anybody who's working on or looking on Facebook Marketplace is also getting exposed to eBay and all those new items. And eBay is working hard at building its, position as a channel and bringing brands into it to, basically start competing up with Amazon. And so that's a massive amount of exposure for sales. And the reason why those sellers are there is because there's demand. They're making those sales. They're making that money, right? So it's a good indicator. Scans like this are a good indicator to say, oh, okay, like this is maybe something I need to evaluate or consider. I might have missed part of it here. There might be an 80-20, investment opportunity to jump into one of these, other marketplace options here to start driving up our revenues.
Yeah, and Zach, you're totally right. Facebook Marketplace, people generally think of as used product, so people don't really care. It's very hard to monitor. It's like totally dynamic. It's like localized, but eBay is not localized, and it's, as I just talked about, it's mostly new, and they're going where the people are. It's very smart. And now there's new products, unauthorized product, gray market product, actually counterfeit product, all going into the channel of these people who are just looking for stuff. So very interesting shifts, and everybody's trying to figure out, what are you going to do about the TikTok? What are you going to do about, all these Chinese sellers coming into the markets, and the Shein and the Temu? Like, this is all moving very fast. Marketplace, everybody's becoming a marketplace that's very dynamic.
What is so impactful is the numbers. Having been through that situation of trying to get an organization on board to understand the problem in the market was really hard without the numbers. And there's obviously lots of opinion and emotion involved, but you're putting a dashboard in front of whatever it may be, executive level or your coworkers, and being like, this is a problem. The numbers don't lie. To be able to take some action, which I think is a huge win, because when you don't have those numbers, it's hard to tell people exactly how bad it is in the market, because you don't know, without it. So questions, comments, be sure to put them into the chat. I see a few coming in. Awesome. Keep them coming.
Yeah, David, I'll say that the pricing I've shown you there is all new product. We generally don't track used product unless someone specifically requests it. You're not going to have resale controls on those generally. It's interesting data to understand the secondary market for your product. But this is new product. It's not like new. It's not open box stuff. It's new. So that $35 price is a new product. Now, question is, should it be called a new product? And that's what Zach will talk about. Probably not. Just a little tip. We'll lead into what Zach will talk about shortly. And Caroline, yeah, I'm looking at your question again. Like, I'm definitely recommending that pricing. There's like they're essentially the two policies that you can have. One's pricing related, and one's authorized reseller related, and like they should be worked together. Like they work very much together if we're trying to really control price point distribution. And so let's talk about what you do, right? Like this is all great, and now what? So what? Right, what next? And so there's a tremendous power in using the right tools for the right project. If any of you have ever tried to do anything around the house, you know that having the right size wrench for something makes your job infinitely faster and more effective. Like if you're just using a hammer when you need a wrench, it's not going to work. You can pound on it all day long. But same thing for this. So the foundation of everything are these policies. And Zach will talk a little bit about this, right? This is like foundation of your house. If you build it on sand, it's going to fall over and no one will feel love, right? They're just going to get mad at you. Like no one wants a house falling on them. The foundation of like your enforcement of your programs is really the quality of your data. So you're going to want to know, kind of like I was showing you, what's happening in the ecosystem. How many places are you being sold on? Where does it matter? What's the kind of price discrepancy? Like what is? Like what is may not be what you want. You might not like it, but like it's not an emotional thing. It just is. But like once you know what it is, then you can fix it. Right. So like that's where you start. And then you have this combination of price policy, authorized policy, one or two of them. And you're going to enforce those policies. And now the way people enforce can range. It could be manually. You just send emails out to people that are creating the problems when you find them. So someone hanging out watching TV on Saturday, watching some college football, taking care of this doesn't work very well. But you got to enforce. You got to enforce unilaterally. Ideally, there's automation because if I'm naughty today, I should get an email. I should be told. And it should escalate based upon my compliance or lack thereof. There needs to be a totally unemotional approach that is unilateral. Everybody gets treated the same. And you decide how you're going to tighten the policies on individual people based on what you write. And so you do have some discretion. But so you start taking action on the data. You will get 85+% compliance, which is good. People are going to start feeling love, and you will start seeing that in your channels. There's more profitability, which is awesome. You're going to have someone to report upwards and outwards, and like, great, we're starting to hit some goals. We see some life here. Let's do more of this. But you're going to find that you got some really, really frustrating resellers, particularly in the marketplaces. There could be on websites that all of a sudden pop up, and you're like, who are these guys? That $35.99 unit we looked at before, like it's not possibly real. They're stealing someone's credit card numbers, but it looks like your brand. Oh my God, get them off, right? So we want to mitigate resellers that are being naughty, like get them off of listings out of marketplaces. This is an art, very hard to do. You could totally blow up your Amazon account if you do this wrong. Like terrible, Zach will talk about that. But what it is, you're gonna get 85% dealt with, and every day they come in and out, we'll show you that. You're gonna take the problem ones, you're gonna mitigate them and go after them. And you're gonna have a couple that you simply, they're just not gonna get off. And so now there's some legal options, and you're gonna send out cease and desist letters from a lawyer that's scary. And I can tell you, I've received this at an address I didn't think that he'd get, and went, oh, maybe I should stop. I did, I stopped. And then there's this, hey, like you're now at the last couple percent, right? So 85% on your enforcement, another 5-7% on your mitigation, do a little cease and desist, you got a couple percent. You're gonna have one or two, particularly Chinese sellers, they're a problem. All right, you may want to actually take legal action beyond a cease and desist, you file a lawsuit. And if you do it right, potentially you can get default judgment, maybe even get damages. And that's when you can actually even possibly take some money from Amazon. We're not going to focus on that area today, but this is like your last 1%, 2%. Question is, how far do you want to go? But it escalates. And you want to, as like kind of like a filter, you're going to have less and less as you go up. And you just keep on ratcheting down your programs. It's all built by starting with the reseller policies and then building upon it as your foundation. Great. So I'm looking at questions that comes in, but I'm hand over to Zach. Zach, why don't you break it down for us?
Yeah, absolutely. And so briefly here, kind of returning to our conversation before and the idea of running a marathon, right? What's the impact for a brand once you do take back control? And it can be the opposite of that death spiral, where these things start working together positively, right? So you're running that marathon, you're eating well, you're getting good sleep, you're recovering faster, you can train more, your speed gets better. Just everything starts working together in the direction that you want it to go. And so, right, as you can see here, right, as your prices start to lift, and just like Andrew said, if you start enforcing these policies consistently, you'll see prices start to come up. That's higher margins, out to your favorite sellers or to you, depending on, depending on those channels. If you're owning it, if you're having a partner there, if you're speaking that love language for them, right, sending them those margins. 2/3 of you are trying to drive up your margins, right? So having those prices come up is really important. And that also then, this is sort of related to several points here, like Ryan in the chat, great point about distributors and setting expectations. And, they're all paying attention to each other, and you'll have less conflict and you'll have happier partners as you are maintaining those prices and keeping those prices up. And it'll help you get out into extra doors and more SKUs or more inventory into the reorders, et cetera. The other piece is you'll have a lot less variability, right? Those slides that Andrew showed us earlier, with the wild price variance and how often those listings prices can change, but that creates a lot of uncertainty for consumers and makes it, you create that gap of trust if they're getting something. I mean, there is so much fraud online these days that people are suspicious. So having more consistency really delivers that message to brands like, to consumers, this brand has it under control. And it's a good indicator too to your retail partners, right? That it shows them that you're invested in them. You're building that love language. You're committing, you're putting your money on the line for them. And they see that and they know that, right? Like to Tiffany's point, they're doing their research, right? They're checking up on you because that shelf space is so precious. So they've got to make sure that they've got good partners in place for that. And that then also speaks to, right, as you have control of your brand, you get better channel ownership. And this is not just about, your marketplace disruption with the lost buy box or the suppressed buy box that happens there. But again, all of that will filter out and impact all of your other channels because, now there is price matching technology. Many people are using that. Many people have a Chrome extension that's, finding best price or coupons, et cetera. And so making sure that you own that channel, keep those prices up, it helps benefit your entire ecosystem. And that overall is going to improve the experiences for your consumers, drive up your goodwill for your brand, right? You'll have fewer negative reviews, and then finally, this leads to more opportunity for marketing, right? As you have additional margins, you can put a little bit more into your budgets for marketing. And as you drive those sellers to your channels, to your side channels, you're going to get more money off of each purchase, right? Each purchase becomes a little bit more valuable for you. Even can outpace that marketing spend that you start to do. And I didn't exactly mention it earlier, but just, an important thing to note is a lot of the marketplaces now, the algorithms are pay to play, right? Especially on Amazon. If you aren't running ads, you're not going to move up in the rankings. And if you don't have the buy box or it's suppressed, you can't run your ads, you're fighting against the algorithm. Once you have control, then this all starts to flow. It just becomes a lot easier. And this is why we asked earlier about kind of the average unit retail prices. And if you're looking at the sales performance for your products, which many of you are, right? Your sales performance of your products is going to go up because you're going to see those higher prices across those different channels. So you'll see that direct impact into your guys' business, right? That's how we start driving up that revenue. And then, cool. Thanks, Andrew. So I'm going to get into briefly following that path of escalation that Andrew talked about, how each of these different programs work and some things you guys should think about. And yeah, and feel free to throw some questions in the chat. For example, is there a problem with feature offer suppression on Amazon if a lower price is found elsewhere? Yes, and actually, maybe I can address that a little bit further, but that's definitely a problem that we see in the marketplace areas. Thank you, Ryan. So for authorized seller program, just like what Andrew said, this is your foundation. You build on top of all of this. Many of you are familiar with these policies, so I don't need to spend a whole lot of time here, but it is important and it's a good signal to your partners. What I will add is there are some cool tips and tricks in here. If you have an in-house legal department or something, like obviously I'm an attorney, but I'm not offering legal advice today. There are some things you can work in here. So I would say ask your lawyers about a liquidated damages clause put into one of these. And if you want to ask, or if we want to talk about that later or after the webinar, I'm happy to. But there's some things we can do with these agreements that make them strong for you to try to pursue some of the enforcement opportunity. And so now let me talk about kind of the map angle of things and programs. There we go. All right, so again, I think many of you are familiar with map programs, and this comes in different flavors, right? Minimum advertised price, internet minimum advertised price, unilateral pricing policy. They all have their pros and cons. It kind of, what's best for a brand is going to vary based on the kind of, the unique genetics of a brand, so to speak, right? Based on your distribution and your product strategy, et cetera. So, a UPP can be really strong, but not all brands are in a position that they can, unilaterally, non-negotiably, consistently enforce it. And so anyway, so there's variations here. I think the main thing that I would echo to folks to keep in mind here is 2 points. One, be consistent. And 2, they work. The data is very consistent for the last 10 years, whether you're doing academic studies or you're looking, at data that providers like TrackStreet have. It's very clear that consistent implementation of these programs will promote higher profits in your channels. And that goes back to you and the brand and also to your partners. So to Andrew's point, it's really effective in building those relationships and supporting that ecosystem. And that's important, right? Because many of these retail partners that are, abiding by this behavior, they can be an important source of, cash flow and, high volume sales. So Dave's got a question. Given that we don't have map pricing in the UK, does Amazon brand protection work in the same way in the US? Hey, that's a great lead-in, David. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's talk about that. All right, so this is now you're moving up in your escalation here. And now we're talking about the unauthorized seller mitigation. There's a lot of places to go here. To Andrew's point, this is very much an art at times and understanding what levers to pull. First place to start typically is always with seller investigation. I think like at the end of the day, when you have unauthorized resellers, you want to try to find out where they are coming from, where they're getting their inventory, and so you can start controlling where that leak is. So keep that in mind always when you're dealing with unauthorized seller mitigation. So seller investigations are always the place to start. And there's a lot of times some low-hanging fruit here where you can find it and you can see where the source is. You can reach out to that person and ask them to stop selling or distributing that product. You can get a lot of ground covered there. After that, you need to look at ways that you can start to enforce it and kind of address some of the pain points that come up. Right? And those come up on marketplaces. Those also come up on all the different websites that are out there. Many websites brands know about, maybe they don't. But consumers will get an ad on Facebook and go click, and all of a sudden they're on a site and you had no idea. Right? So that's why some of these website takedowns and the marketplace complaints are really important for a kind of a holistic strategy of enforcement. And to your question, David, about the marketplace complaints, yes, you can enforce on unauthorized sellers, regardless of a MAP program, because the basis for protection in unauthorized sellers is actually not related to price. So, think about this two sides of the coin. On one side, you have your authorized partners who are subject to their MAP policies, and here price and advertising matter. Flip it over to the other side, and you've got unauthorized sellers, and these folks, they're not subject to your MAP policy. These folks are just unauthorized. And so the pain and the problems here are more than just price. You experience price as a pain point, but their violation is not dictated by price. So a MAP policy is not material, I guess I'll say, to dealing with the unauthorized sellers that you have in these marketplaces or in these websites, right? In those scenarios, you are looking at intellectual property violations. Now, to be very clear, and to Andrew's point earlier, gotta be careful. You can get into a lot of trouble if you do this wrong, and there's a lot of bad information and advice out there. So, for example, many folks like to try to file counterfeit complaints on Amazon. And that it should only be used if you have evidence that it's an actual counterfeit product. Otherwise, you're going to get a lot of blowback, because when that seller appeals to Amazon and win, then your account gets flagged. And if you lose enough of those appeals, then Amazon will suspend your account and you can't get those sales. So we've seen that happen with brands and with sellers. It's unfortunate. When you're pursuing these sort of mitigation techniques, you just want to make sure that you're being careful. You're using the right type of intellectual property at the right time, right? Like website takedowns. A DMCA notice is a copyright-based takedown, and using that well. You can use those takedowns on some of the marketplaces, but there's nuance there and how to apply it. So given the time constraints, I don't want to get into the weeds on it. Although I'd love to, I talk about this all the time, but we're happy to chat more, follow up, in a future conversation, or reach out to us afterwards and we can dig a little bit deeper into it.
That's a really good takeaway of, being cautious when you're reaching out to Amazon about those things, because it can come back to bite you bad. Final questions, comments put into the chat as we round it out here.
Yeah, I will add very much, do not fall for the trap of reporting everything in Amazon brand registry as counterfeit. You will find yourself to have a button that becomes unresponsive, and it's virtually impossible to get out of that. So again, very nuanced, and Zach definitely knows all the tips and tricks here. So I encourage you to reach out to him for more information on that. Caroline, I saw your question regarding MAP, and yeah, there's just everyone we work with has an AOR increase. It's just simply what happens, and happy to connect with you offline about that after the seminar. So we've got a lot of time left. We're gonna move pretty quickly, but I want to show you what happens when we start doing these things right. And this may help you understand, Caroline, actually very much here. So these are sports and outdoor space. The top brand is a company that just has visibility. They're actually not enforcing any policies yet. And you could see a crazy amount of price changes, listings, deviations, it's wild. And then you see down here a company with the enforcement of their policies. And you can see that there's much smaller price deviation, less price changes through the day, less listings. So it's more dollars being funneled to the right partners and pockets, right? That's the goal of all of this. And so if we looked at enforcement on stopping unauthorized listings, so the reality is every day sellers show up that shouldn't be there. They get their hands on product. It could be through liquidation channels. It could be because you offered some kind of subscribe and save deal, what Zach and I were talking about yesterday. It could be lots of ways, right? But you got to get them off. They need to scram. So we want to stop them every day too. And so this is just an ongoing thing. You just have to keep on it. And that's where automation really matters. Let's talk about impact of authorized reseller enforcement. David, this is kind of you, right? How do we start tightening things down, not pricing related, understand selective distribution in Europe is very nuanced. But let's look at no enforcement, right? There's basically almost everyone is unauthorized. And then when you turn on enforcement, things plummet. People start behaving. right? And they're little kids. Like, we're mom looking out the window. So are you. Hey, kids behave better when they know they're being watched, when they have to be yelled at once in a while. And that's how they know they're being watched. So let's just look about dollars. So a pet company, they had a MAP policy, Caroline, unauthorized seller enforcement, everybody else. So there was a 95% decrease in MAP violations. Right? Prices went up. AUR went up. Brick and mortar sales. Sorry, that's somebody added it on my slide. It's not price increase. 60% sales increase. So massive. So they got more product in slots and deeper. So people weren't talking to them about taking in their new products because they weren't feeling loved. All of a sudden, they had some date nights. They were feeling pretty good about each other, and they expand. And then Amazon sellers moved from 200 plus to under 10. Now, this company wanted to own Amazon themselves, their account. And you know what? They had a massive increase. Millions of dollars of sales went to their pockets. At a higher price point with more profitability, was that enabled them to get in the flywheel of advertising, right? So driving more. So that's where this stuff works. That's the impact, and that's where it goes. Yeah, we went through very quickly. We got a couple minutes left. You've all been great in volunteering questions along the way.
Awesome
Anything
engagement.
additional?
Yeah, final questions, definitely pop them in there. One here I had offline was the idea of getting the inventory back. Do you recommend that brands, when they're doing a cleanup, that they actually go and offer to buy the inventory from these guys that are being a pain in the neck?
Good one. Can I,
Yeah.
can I jump on this one, Andrew?
Yeah, I might, let's see. I might have the same answer. I might get a different one. Go for it.
Okay, yeah. I would say it really depends on the situation of the brand and the situation of the seller. Because not all inventory that these sellers have is created equal. So you've got to be really conscious of, all right, what's it going to be like getting that inventory back? How well can we get it back into circulation? What are where are they currently housing that inventory and how are they going to get it there? And then I would, tie all of that to getting commitments from them not to sell your brand and then finding out the source of that brand, of the product, et cetera. It can be a really powerful technique if you've got a company that's willing to do it.
Yeah. And I would add to that, it depends upon the impact they're having in your market and how much inventory they have as well. So on Amazon, if they got one or two in their mom and pop, cheaper just to buy it out,
Hmm.
right? If it's not an expensive product, sometimes you want to understand more who they are. And I totally agree with that. If you're going to get a lot of inventory back, you need to have an agreement in place. They're not going to be touching your brand again.
Good point. Final question here. Do you recommend a map, IMAP, or UPP? Suppose it depends on the situation, right?
What do you think, Andrew?
Yeah, Zach. I mean, I think it really does prevent a situation. I mean, I think the most common least resistance getting in place is MAP. And then if you really have some brain equity and power, I think unilateral UPP is fantastic, but there are nuanced differences between the two.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And Caroline, for this, as to map to controlling counterfeit, Andrew, maybe you have a different perspective on this, but I would consider those separate programs and policy and problems. MAP is going to be more for people that you know. If it's a counterfeit product, something you don't know and don't know where they're getting it, you're going to want to look at different techniques there. If you do have factory theft, I mean, I used to regularly tour my factories. I've like taught brands how to set up programs to maintain good behavior of their manufacturing partners as well as their supply chains, et cetera. Happy to connect with you on some tips and tricks on that. Making sure you've got good behaviors out of it because it's super common. And honestly, everybody listening, like third shifting or theft out of the manufacturing warehouse, like it happens way more than you think.
The stories you two have. I say, like, if you're gonna have a cocktail hour, invite Zach and Andrew to tell the stories of what they've witnessed, because I'm sure you have some doozies.
Good stuff out there.
Awesome. We are at time. Thank you all for joining and with the awesome engagement and contributing to the polls. We definitely encourage follow-up conversation with the Sigil and Track Street teams. Obviously, they are awesome at what they do. They're experts in this space. So we are definitely encouraging conversation with them and us as well. We're always looking for new content ideas, so feel free to reach out at tiffany@bwgconnect.com. So that is a wrap. Happy Thursday, everyone. Take care, and we're moving into the weekend. Take care, guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye.